Maurice,
Yeah,
I have a joke.
I'd love to hear it.
How many conservatives does it take to change a light bulb?
Uh-oh. Um, you better get to the punchline quickly.
Yeah, I know there are not that many people here. Conservatives don't like change.
Okay, I gotcha. You're probably safe with the
The,
assorted folks present.
the
Um,
current president, yes.
yes, and perhaps with everybody who's going to show up. I really don't know, but uh, I have to remain neutral. But not about fundamental issues of human rights and freedom. I don't have to remain neutral about that, and I am not.
Oh, I have to update my name and community.
Thank you. I'm I'm seeing names of people I've been sending emails to about convention as well as this course. Thanks for bearing with probably an increasing frequency of messages from the mothership. Welcome, everybody. It's the top of the hour. We'll give it a couple minutes. It's good to see faces and names. Just give it a little less than one more minute. Oh, there we go. Okay, one moment. I'm letting Sherry in, and I'm going to make her my co-host. You have the power, Sherry. All
So I
right.
see. So I see. Thank you.
Um, can I let you let others in? Uh,
Absolutely.
all right. Thank you so much. Well, welcome everyone. I think instead of having two or three people say where you're from, because we've done that a couple times now. I'd rather just take a moment before we get started to name that we're all living through a very scary and painful time. Um, and I think this is, I don't think we have Canadian members that are part of this cohort. So I know that's true for us as Americans um, who share Jewish values and Reconstructionist values that are deeply tied to the sacredness of democracy. And of course, as part of the Jewish community, we're also grappling with the firebombing of the synagogue in Jackson, Mississippi. Thank God no people were injured or hurt or killed, but uh, you know, there just aren't really adequate words for um, acknowledging how hard this is. And I am speaking, I think, I intend to say this in a way that is uh, not partisan. I think we're way beyond that in terms of our religious movement being quite unique in its very strong embrace of the ideals of democracy. Um, Part of why Mordecai Kaplan became enthusiastic about his entire theory of Judaism as an evolving religious civilization was because um, he saw the informal and unspoken ways that the best ideals of American democracy were influencing and subtly reshaping North American Jewish life. And that kind of made a light bulb go off for him. And it led him to review all of Jewish history going back to biblical times with an eye towards looking at how Jewish communities in different parts of the world had actually been quite good at integrating very often some of the best ideas and ideals of the societies where they were hosted, even if they were hosted uncomfortably. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. And so for Kaplan, 100 years ago, starting to write as a young person in the 20s and then going into the 30s, he really, as an immigrant, who arrived in this country and then immediately saw women win the vote. And then in less than 2 years, celebrated his own daughter's bat mitzvah as the first bat mitzvah. Um, this is all through his diaries and through his earliest writing is his enthusiasm for um, the multicultural, progressive, pluralistic, democratic future that he believed was unfolding here, and that Judaism should not hesitate to both influence and be influenced by. So, all of that is at stake, and we're in a place that is really hard. And I hope that being together for this little chunk of time tonight um, can provide a little bit of comfort and company, um, and give people maybe a little respite from um, from the intense thoughts and feelings that I'm sure we're all wrestling with in our own personal ways. So I wanted to start there. Um, and Now, perhaps a little awkwardly, I want to pivot to if folks have questions um, relating to the rest of the course. We have tonight, and then we aren't meeting on the Martin Luther King holiday a week from tonight, but we will meet the Monday after that. So if folks have um, questions about, what the trajectory looks like or something that you just really wanted to make sure you got a chance to ask, I want to welcome that. Okay. All right. Well, um, then I'm going to share my screen and we are going to talk about do do do. We are going to talk about major events, galas, and auctions, major fundraising events. So let me just get myself a little sorted out here on my screen. So um, we're going to talk about something that is both joyful and complicated, and that is putting on a major fundraising event, a gala, an auction, a concert with some other component that includes fundraising, a big event. These can be really exciting and really creative. They can even be spiritual experiences for a synagogue community, but they can also eat up time and energy and goodwill if they're not planned thoroughly. So, what I'm going to do in this session is I'm going to actually cover like the essential steps of planning and executing and then following up on specifically what I'm going to call galas and auctions. And I'm going to focus on practical steps involved. Um, Although, of course, as we always do, we keep in mind that we're wanting to align what we're doing with your congregation's missions, and we have bottom lines that are bigger than just hitting a fundraising target. We want to strengthen relationships. We want to raise money, hopefully without burning people out. Although it's hard to promise that nobody will feel burnt out after one of these events. But hopefully, we can take some steps to minimize the degree of exhaustion that these events often cause. And if they are done right, yes, there's some exhaustion, but there's also a lot of satisfaction. Okay, so um, what are the benefits and costs of doing one of these? Right. So, I mean, this is pretty common sense here. You can raise a lot of money all at once. You can build relationships, and that's both within your congregation. You can help people get to know each other a little better, but you can also strengthen some of your relationships with the immediate surrounding community. We'll talk about that, and I kind of covered the third one on the list on the left. Um, it's a chance to create some great memories together and some stories. We already have talked a lot about how important authentic stories of accomplishment and joy um, matter to a congregation's sense of identity and to its ability to fundraise in the future. Um, and you can see the last two of those in the green are also there and are reasons why we want to do this. There are costs to doing this and risk, right? So putting on an event like this can cost a lot of money, and sometimes everyone can do their best, and it could still end up costing more than you expected. It's possible to lose money on an event like this if several things conspire to go wrong at once. And it's important, it's rare that that happens, but if it does happen, it's important to not let that just completely demoralize everyone. There is nobility in taking a good risk. And the best thing to do is to learn from it if it doesn't play out financially the way you hoped. These take a lot of people's time. and they'll always take more time than was anticipated. And the flip side of that is that even if you kind of get ahead of the curve on things, these will eat up all the available time that can be gobbled. Um, these events do risk burning out your staff and volunteers, not so much if you do them once or once every 2 or 3 years, but if you do them every year, that's where I see the risk of burning out staff and volunteers. And I want to make the distinction that burnout is not the same thing as everybody working really hard behind something and then kind of pushing themselves and then celebrating their success and then being really, really wiped out. That's not burnout, right? Burnout is like a demoralizing state that comes from repeatedly being asked to extend beyond your normal capacities without having like satisfying results or appreciation, etc. And so doing this every single year is where I would watch out for burnout. Synagogue's putting a lot on the line with this. If it kind of all goes kerflooey, then there's a lot of people who may feel embarrassed for a while, or it could shake the confidence that people may have in the congregation's ability to do things. That's kind of a worst case scenario, but worth mentioning. And the last thing is, I don't think this last one is really a problem I expect Reconstructionist communities to have. Um, but there are, and I say that because look, we have our we have our gifts and our challenges. We're no better than the congregations of any other movement. But one of our challenges tends not to be that we've grown sort of wealthy and complacent, and that we're starting to get scattered about what the theme or the story would be behind a gala or a major auction kind of event. We're pretty good at being able to authentically represent and say, this is why we're doing this. This is what this evening is all about. And I'm not so worried about that one. Okay, so let's actually start with some practical matters. Um, Before we even talk about what kind of uh, e- event we're talking about here, if you're just thinking we want to do a big event and we want it to raise a big chunk of money, and that's all we know so far. Um, Nevertheless, there's got to be some goals that you can pretty specifically name. And ideally, these should be goals that include raising a certain amount of money, but they should also include some other things you're hoping this event will do. Some of the kinds of things I just mentioned around strengthening relationships or potentially um, bringing some prospective members into your community, perhaps for the first time, or getting to know um, guests that you might invite from local businesses or other religious congregations, depending on what kind of event you're doing. Whatever your goals are, when you start this process, you want to write them down and kind of keep them near. And they might change, but it can also be really helpful if the work you start putting into building a major event starts to kind of become full of details that take on lives of their own. It can be helpful to be able to go back to your core goals.
Rabbi Maurice, it's Dan. Sorry to interrupt, but
That's okay.
I tend to think chronologically. Can you speak at some point to actually the step that happens before what you're describing now, which is the decision to actually do an event? Um, how
Yeah.
how should a group or a congregation think about, is it likely to be worthwhile? And is it likely to end up more on the positive side than the negative? And I speak partly from experience because I know, you know, people get excited. Two or three people say, "Let's do a gala,"
Yes.
but excitement is not enough for something to succeed. So, are there any predictors, any particular things that a congregation should assess before they commit themselves to a big event?
Yes, absolutely. And I appreciate that. I think that's a helpful interjection. And um, what I want to say is usually what happens is that there are um, multiple conversations that emerge within a congregation's volunteers and staff, possibly on its board, where people are hopefully motivated by a sense that we could do something big and wonderful, and it could have this big financial impact, but it could also be really good for us. And I guess what I would encourage is to follow those impulses where they lead and to be a little wary of conversations that emerge from a place of a feeling of desperation, like we've tried everything else and maybe the thing we haven't tried is a really big event. Or where it's just like what you were describing, Dan, where there's just like one or two people, let's say two people um, who have kind of gotten excited about this, but they're a bit disconnected, perhaps from the work that other folks in lay leadership and on committees and on staff are doing. Um, so I don't have an answer that's more specific than that to how congregations decide if they should do this. And I don't mean to suggest that where we are in this slideshow is that a firm decision has been made. I think you're helping me refine this a little bit. I think what I'm trying to put forward is that you are thinking about the possibility of achieving some really important goals, and you're thinking, perhaps even in the abstract, maybe we should do a major event, or we should at least look into it. And identifying what your goals are for that is going to be helpful because one of the things it will also do is make it easier for you to think about what you could do other than a major event to try to achieve those same goals.
That's helpful, thinking about the fact that the commitment is not absolute at the start of what you're describing. It one might decide to proceed or not.
Right, for sure. And this is the funny thing, right? Where I am in this slideshow is I'm a couple slides ahead of where you actually form a team, right? And so at this point, wherever this ideal is living, um, it's living somewhere, it's living with some subset of people in your congregation that are not the ones who actually get to decide whether or not you all are going to do this, right? I mean, ultimately, it's your board that's going to decide to do it, and they're not going to decide to do it if they don't have the support of their clergy to do it. And probably if they don't, if their executive director, if they have someone in that role, and they're saying no, bad idea, they're boards are pretty reluctant to force anybody's hand on something like this. Um, so I'm gonna jump back into this next question, which is asking yourselves what is the story that you want this event to tell if you're going to do it, and using that language on purpose because the story that you're going to want this event to tell is partly about who you've been up until this point, and it's partly going to be about some specific things you really want to do with this larger expected chunk of revenue that you're out to raise. So this could be about um, expanding our capacity for staffing and being really specific about whose job you're going to be able to enlarge or who you are going to hire to do something new. This could be about providing some major upgrades to your facilities to the way you're able to offer adult ed or religious school. This could be about a lot of things. And you want to be able to tell a story that is both about your mission and your vision, as well as about some very concrete, specific things that you're trying to do. And then, if you're going to go ahead and do an event, you're going to want to have some kind of theme for that event. And um, we could spend a lot of time talking about themes, and I'm not going to. I'm just going to acknowledge that themes can take a lot of different tones. They can be joyful, they can be playful, they can be connected to a season of the year or an adjacent Jewish holiday. They can be connected to specific Jewish values. What they need to be able to do for you is provide um, ideas for a lot of the detailing you're going to do around this event. So everything from the language you use, the name you give to this event, the decor that you choose, some of the fun details that you include in building this event, those would all be attached to or derived from your theme, and your theme should come from a story you want your event to tell. So, and I'm gonna keep going here, and I'm gonna keep in mind the question of who's doing this deciding and at what point is a firm decision getting made. So I'm going to suggest that by the time we're talking about making the goals more concrete, you've got some of the core players that are now in the conversation, right? So you've probably got clergy in the conversation. You've got whoever is the most important administrative staff person in the conversation, and you've got some board members in the conversation. If you have a fundraising or finance committee, by the time you're talking about some concrete goals for a possible event, you've got those people that are now in this conversation. And I just put together what you see on screen is, a set of examples from a fictitious hypothetical congregation. I'm imagining a congregation that maybe has about 170 households. Um, and in the case of this particular congregation, what you can notice here is that they're planning to have, they're hoping that one of their goals is to get at least 20 people who are prospective members to attend. So they're going to need to have a strategy for how they're going to accomplish that. They want to have some guests coming from neighboring congregations. They're going to need to have a strategy for how they're going to accomplish that. Um, they know that they want to take the occasion to offer a couple of different awards. And this members attending as individuals 200 means that they're wanting about 160 people who are members of their 170 household congregation. So maybe that's 450 people. They want 160 of those people to attend this event. So that's going to impact some of the more detailed decisions. For example, a decision about how you price tickets for this event. If you're wanting to have a larger number of people and a broader base of participation, then you can't price a lot of people out. Um, if you are trying to do something different, and you're trying to put on a smaller event in terms of numbers of people, but maybe you have good reasons to concentrate people who may have more income to give, more funds to give, then you might end up with a smaller number of people that are attending. So this is making your goals concrete is an important next step. And these goals, if you really do decide to go for it, and you end up with a committee that is working on this task, then these goals can also be adjusted. And if you're setting goals, you want to also decide how it is you're going to measure whether or not you achieved success. Okay, So, um, if you've got kind of the key people that are needed, and many of whom would serve on a committee to do an event like this, then at some point, you need to decide what kind of event you want to do. And what I've done here is try to symbolize, a concert, and evening that includes giving some awards. By the way, these are not mutually exclusive. Chances are you'll do some hybrid kind of event. Um, you can do a dinner, you can do a live auction, you can also do an event that is a joyful gathering after your community has spent 3 weeks doing an all online auction, and where you are coming to celebrate the success of that, plus you're going to raise some more money during the actual event. There are a lot of different choices, and what you're going to want to do is try to suit the event that you decide to do to what you have the bandwidth to do, um, what kind of venue you think that you want to do this event in, what the goals are that you have set, the really concrete goals, and um, uh, what kinds of events you think would have the greatest appeal to members of your community. And you may ask people. Hopefully, the people who are a part of thinking this through are asking a lot of members and kind of fielding where people's interest is, where their enthusiasm is. Okay, so at this point, let's say that you have decided on a type of event, your board is given a green light, and your board is assigned um, a pair of people to be lead coordinators or chair people of this event committee. And now it's time to recruit your team. Um, you're going to want to form an event planning team that includes people from some different walks of life in your congregation. You're also going to want, oh, my little image didn't come up. I wonder why that is. Okay, well, there was a really lovely image there that actually listed a whole set of different areas of responsibility. Um, and I want to find it. So let me just escape out of this for a moment. There we go. Um, Hopefully you can still see that. So the people, you're going to need at least 6 to 10 people um, on this committee. Because if you look in this white rectangle, this is kind of a starter list of areas of responsibility that different people on this committee need to be willing to be in charge of. So, everything from logistics and venue to a website landing page, publicity and promotion, technology or AV, volunteer coordination, there's follow-up and thank yous. There are a couple of other aspects that are more specific that we're going to talk about that are also folded into this, like where it says website landing page designer or manager, that's going to also connect with whatever staff you have that's available to handle the software that you're going to want to use um, if you're doing any kind of auction involving this event. You're going to need to have some management software that you choose to do that and keep it from becoming its own really complicated set of record keeping obligations. Okay, so um, I want to pause for a moment and just name part of what I'm doing tonight is I'm kind of doing a flyover of the various components of this. This is not a precisely chronological order overview. I would say it's broadly and roughly that type of overview. Um, but I would also say that Sorry, I just had another thought on that. Um, well, hopefully it'll come back. So you've got your team. Oh, I know what I was going to say. So in the chapter of the fundraising guide on this topic, it comes with a link to a worksheet. And the worksheet is very granular step by step and moves much more explicitly through a workable chronological order. And it's not the only order that would work for doing this, but it is one that will work. So that's what I wanted to mention. Okay, you've got your team. People have a variety of responsibilities. You've decided on a particular kind of event after having researched what some of the options might look like. And you're starting the process of planning. And this process is going to end with you having a detailed timeline that goes from where you are at this point over the course of a bunch of months. And it's going to conclude with a list of tasks for what's called a run of show, right? Like what you're going to do the day before um, and what you're going to do the day of the event. So here we are back near the beginning of all of this. And one of the things that's really important, and that I know that our congregations really value, is they want major events that they do to shine with inclusivity, to reflect those values. And there are a lot of different ways to make your event more inclusive. And so it's important that you consciously attend to how to try to plan your efforts for inclusivity right from the beginning. And if you've been kind of reading some of the items in this list, as I've been speaking, that's perfect because I'm not going to read the whole list out loud. But I will pause for a moment and ask if anybody has a question or a comment about one of these aspects of inclusivity and how you might plan for them.
I would just add that also thinking about visual inclusivity,
Okay,
larger print. We did a bingo night. We had large print bingo cards, but we also had braille cards. So not just physical, but other types.
thank you for mentioning that. I really appreciate that. Anyone else?
Hi, this is Alex.
Yeah,
Tell me if I'm going down the wrong path here, Rabbi, but um, a lot of events uh, offer some level of alcohol. It's an evening thing. It's both something people enjoy for a night out, and it also can be helpful in the fundraising aspect.
no doubt.
But um, we may have members who are not comfortable in that environment.
Right.
So how do you balance that?
Uh, there, it's not so easy. Um, and you know, I've been to events that were alcohol free, and I've been to events where alcohol was served. Um, and I've seen examples where alcohol is served, but it's actually not centered. Um, so and where there's an opportunity to get non-alcoholic beverages that is actually located somewhere else than the place where alcoholic beverages are being provided. Um, and there's no 100% perfect answer for this. I don't think that it's like morally unacceptable to choose to go ahead and have alcohol, even if there are some members especially if it's a small number of members who say, well, then I can't be at the event. Um, I don't think that that's like an automatic veto. Um, I think it depends a lot on also the culture of your local community. So, we have a congregation in Vallejo, California, and they're very embedded in wine country. And there's a lot, no pun intended here, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit um, in terms of being able to do a big event that features and benefits from the sponsorship of a local winery. And that is such a common occurrence in the general community there. And in the past experience of their members, that it would probably not cause controversy, but they might choose at some point, if they started hearing from people, they might choose to try one without. It's kind of the best I can do on that. Um,
Rabbi Maurice, question.
yeah,
So on this tiered ticket pricing, low cost admissions, and so forth, what's the kind of messaging that seems effective that would not embarrass those who need to spend less, and are looking around at those who have you know, the princely pricing option,
yes,
and are contributing more.
right. This is a great question. And you're also reminding me that I want to say these bullet points here, this is not trying to say you should do each one of these things. I'm saying these are areas that you should look at, right? So, one reason why congregations will do tiered ticket pricing is because they want to make sure that uh, people throughout their congregations' economic diversity are able to attend. And then, coming up with what you're naming uh, those different kinds of tickets. Um, there's no look every like there's no perfect name that's going to rule out the possibility of someone not being reminded that they're not able to afford doing the sponsorship ticket or whatever, that more expensive ticket um, looks like. I think if you're going to do this kind of event and you want to hit a particular fundraising target, the higher that target is, um, the more reasons you're going to have to want to create um, known and named opportunities. I don't mean public recognition of individuals, but I mean like this is called a sponsor's ticket, and to come to the event, or this is a ticket where a person is able to sponsor a whole table. There are a lot of different ways that you can design this so that you are minimizing the opportunities for people to feel embarrassed or in some way lesser. And one thing I will say is that there's a lot of things you can do that aren't part of the ticketing um, that can express your values of honoring people for many different types of participation and contribution. And that includes giving awards, in particular, giving awards to volunteers. Um, so there are other ways that you can also invite and include participation from everyone. Like just a random example, you can set it up so that um, in order to attend, you need to do two things. You need to get a ticket, and you need to also fill in and a field um, on the ticket webpage where you have up to 300 words to share something that you find lovely or inspiring, or a memory, or a reason why this community is important to you. And it can be as few as 2 words, but everybody has to participate in that, and something is going to happen with that content that everyone contributes. I really like congregations that do things like that, where it's not just money that gets you in, it's also some other small action that everyone does. Okay, what I want to say, one other thing about planning for inclusivity. So I'm a big believer in progress and in, progress, not perfection. I'm a big believer in let's try to up our game over what we've been able to do over this past year or two in a variety of arenas in terms of our inclusivity. And I also think it's important for there to be transparent communication about what you tried to do, what this committee tried to do, and then after the event is over, when there's a newsletter article celebrating the event, a piece of that should be some accounting for how the organizers of the event felt that it went, perhaps based on survey feedback, perhaps based on conversations. So you're aiming to do better. And if you're not sure about inclusivity around a particular area of a major event you're planning, totally get in touch with us in our department. We will talk that through with you. We will think it through with you. We will find out if there are some great practices that maybe you haven't thought of. Don't hesitate to use us for a reality check or a thought partner to see how you can try to reach your goals in this area too. Okay, you've gotten this far, and now it's time to design a sustainable budget. And what I recommend is that you come up with a budget. The committee comes up with a budget for this event. It shows that budget to the board. It asks the board, do you think we've gotten this right on the costs side? What are we forgetting? And I actually think it's important enough that even if the board says, I think you covered it all, and I don't think you underestimated anything in terms of costs, the committee should still take it back and review the costs again. You want to maximize your odds for being close to the mark on what this is going to cost to do. Okay, and what I have there in that list is not a complete list, but it's covering a lot. Staff overtime is an important one. That it's important to not just be like, oh, our people will just work more and then they'll take some time off later. I wouldn't do that. I would budget for paying people for some overtime. They may or may not take time off later. That may not help them, but some overtime will make a difference and make people feel their time is valuable. So once you have a budget and the board is agreed, now you're ready to actually set up your detailed event planning timeline. Oh, I can go back to presenting this. All right. So, putting together a detailed timeline is a lot of work. And this is going to be work that you'll find the guide very, very helpful on. It will help you, create your own list of things that need to happen. And this is probably some of the hardest work is happening right here in this step, because you're involving everybody on your committee. You are looking at each other's work. You're building this timeline out on a spreadsheet or using whatever form of documenting how you're doing this like the first time through. Maybe it's on butcher paper and and with different colored markers, and it's heading towards a final version that is printed out and is in nice, neat columns. But you really want to try to cover every step that you can think of. And when you're trying to figure out the date of your event, take a moment to have somebody find out when any other Jewish community organizations might be having a similar kind of event. And if they are, don't schedule yours at the same time as theirs. Um, Even if they aren't, call them anyway and say you wanted to check. They'll really, really appreciate that you did that. And not that you're being underhanded about why you did that, but it just so happens that if you do that, once you do have your date fixed, just let them know as a courtesy. Letting them know also means that they may talk about your event. In fact, they may even try to help in little ways to boost your event. And that is just good all around. All right. So now I want to home in a little bit on an important part of what this committee is going to be figuring out. And it is, this is one of those pieces that you're going to have figured out before you've mapped your entire timeline out. Probably, it's going to have some bearing on your timeline. But for starters, one of the things that you want to do is have your target revenue amount for this event, right? You want to have your anticipated expenses and you want to have your goal for what your net is going to be. That's really basic. And then you're going to want to identify revenue streams. And this is going to depend on what kind of event you're doing. If you're doing a gala evening that's a dinner with some awards and some music and someone emceeing, and it's not an auction, um, but it's reaching its target revenue through ticket sales and sponsorships primarily. Maybe there's also some raffle or prize drawing during the event. Maybe there is a moment for a couple of targeted fundraising appeals, religious school, Jewish summer camp, scholarship support, B'nai Mitzvah tutoring, uh, um, fixing the thing that got broke last year in that one hall that's driving everyone crazy. Whatever it is, like you could have an evening that's basically a gala with dinner and some emceeing and entertainment that includes a moment for live donation. And that will affect, like I said, what you need to raise from those different revenue streams. If it's an auction or an event that combines maybe some music and emceeing with a portion of the evening that is a live auction, whether there's dinner in that kind of event or not, you can also do an event like that without dinner. You can do heavy hors d'oeuvres. But whatever it is, if you have an auction that's part of things, then probably your live and or silent auction. And I would suggest if you're doing a live auction, you absolutely do an accompanying silent auction, and we'll talk about that. But that's going to be a bigger chunk of your anticipated revenue, and you may not be looking to generate as much income from tickets. You're still, no matter what you do, going to want to come up with a place for sponsorships. I'll say more about that in a bit. And you're going to want to have some kind of printed program or a tribute book where people can purchase ads. And that's a really good place to look for support from your wider local community. Side note, if you're asking local businesses and nonprofit organizations and other religious congregations to buy an ad, you need to also have your board needs to budget some money, not a huge amount, but some money so that you can buy ads in their major events. You've got to reciprocate that. So something to think about. Okay. There's the fundraising that your event is there to do for your congregation. And then there is the fundraising you might do to cover costs of having the event, right? So that's what I was just kind of starting to allude to, and why I have these images that are intended to represent like a local co-op, a local radio station, a grocery, a bank. And this is where, the places where your members work that are open to doing community sponsorship and that already have a track record of sponsoring, kids sports teams and youth groups and other kinds of things. This is one of the ways that you can help raise the money to actually cover some of the costs of having the event. Ultimately, the money is all fungible, right? But just want to name that if you do a really good job of being organized about the fundraising you're doing to cover costs of having the event, or to at least cover part of those costs, the more money that you'll raise overall, and the more you'll shrink your expenses. It's just pretty basic, right? Okay. Now let's talk about imagining that your timeline is finished and your board is good with it, and you really are ready to move forward on that timeline and start enacting things. Early, very early on that timeline, almost first thing is book everything. Book everything you can. Caterers, musicians, photographers, guest speakers, they're in high demand. Lock them in as soon as you can. It is not too early to lock people in a year in advance. By the way, a year or 16 months in advance is not too early to plan for one of these if you haven't done these before. It's actually pretty wise. If you are going to do this at a venue, you want to reserve that venue as far in advance as you can, right? You also want to identify backup options in case somebody cancels. So that is a reason to not let these events get too complicated, right? The more different people providing talent or skilled services that you're counting on to make this event work, those are the more pieces in this machine that could potentially break. And in some cases, it's not a disaster, but in other cases, it can kind of wreck your event. So you need to figure out like what would wreck this event and come up with a backup strategy. And those strategies might be pretty creative, but you need to have a backup strategy. Now, there is one person that you actually cannot book for this event, not 100%. And I'm wondering if you're already guessing who that person is. It is your senior rabbi. If you have a rabbi, if you have more than one, then it's your senior rabbi. But if you have a rabbi, you actually cannot count 100% on that person being able to be a part of this event. And that is because they might get confronted with a pastoral emergency or a death in the community. And that will always take priority over coming to this event, always. So be wary of planning an event in which a rabbi plays a major role. It's not a great idea to have them MC, no matter how funny and talented they might be, or to be doing a teaching that is an important part of, sort of the quote unquote entertainment for the evening, or if they're musical, to kind of have the event sort of center around their music. Don't do it. This isn't the time for that. Okay. Okay. We're just kind of moving our way through some of these different elements that this group has given careful thought to and done a lot of hard work in putting together their timeline. And we're not going to spend a lot of time on what you want your web page to do tonight, because as we've seen, there are several kinds of fundraising campaigns or events that we've already learned about in this course that require their own web page, their own website landing page. For a gala or an auction event, what you need is a web page with event details and a place where people can click to get tickets. Um, uh, and you also want to make sure that you are using material that you are anything that's printed that's telling people that this event is happening, like a flyer or a brochure. It should have a QR code on it so that people can scan that and get to this page. It should also have the web address on it so that people who prefer that method can get to this page. And in the end, just to give you a heads up, the money that you raise, whether you do an auction or not, and some of the information that you collect from people, there's going to be work to do after the event to integrate it into whatever your synagogue CRM, right? Your general synagogue management software is. If you don't have synagogue management software, then whatever it is that you're using, even if it's Google Docs and spreadsheets, wherever you collect the information you collect, you're going to end up needing to do some information transfer. And I'll say a word about these companies that are in the top here: Give Butter, Network for Good, and Better World. They're companies that you might want to use if you're doing an auction, and that you might want to use as platforms for doing the actual auction, because they're designed to do that for small nonprofits. In fact, what a great opportunity to talk about your event management software. So, like I said, there are a number of different fundraising management software platforms that are out there. I'm not talking for a moment about galas and auctions. I'm talking generally. There's a whole chapter of the guide to fundraising that is about online platforms for fundraising management. Some people don't want to have an online platform for fundraising management. They want to just use Shoal Cloud or Easy Shoal or Breeze or whatever they might be using as their general synagogue management software, and they want to input data about donations and have it all live there. But the fundraising management software that's out there, first of all, some of it's free, like Zephy, and Give Butter is also free. Some of it's very low cost. It's extremely handy, and it can generate. It can be pretty easy to move the data that you want from any one of these platforms over to whatever your synagogue management platform is, if you want to be able to ultimately have everything over there. So what I wanted to do was now bring it back to having a gala, and in particular, I'll speak to having an auction that's part of a gala. So over on the left, these are three different companies that offer low cost or free fundraising management platforms. And all three of these ones have a live auction mode. So I won't get into the nitty-gritty of that, but they're designed so that whichever volunteers or staff you have that are tracking, the winning bids and getting the information and the amounts, they can immediately input that information during a live auction, and then these things will immediately set up a lot of lovely options for you, including options that will avoid um, people having to do much to check out at the end. Um, in fact, they may even eliminate the need for people to do any kind of checkout. If you've ever done an auction or been to one, you may have seen people annoyed because it's now nearly 10 o'clock and they're still waiting in line to pay for the things that they won because that hasn't all been streamlined and done quickly. Um, the two that are in the middle, I'm mentioning them because I know, especially for Zephy, quite a lot of our congregations are already using it. They don't have a live auction mode, but it's not too cumbersome. And you're going to find out in a minute that if you are doing a live auction, you probably shouldn't be doing more than like 7 or 8 live auction items. So it's not that hard to manually input the data, and you can use these other platforms that are in the middle for managing a concurrent silent auction, and you can also use the ones on the left for that. My personal preference is for the ones on the left, but there's plenty of time for people to go explore and play around and see what that's all like. Okay. Um, Now we're going to spend a little bit of time with this slide. Um, and I want to talk about events with a live auction, right? So just to be clear on what we mean here, live auction means there is someone serving as an auctioneer, could be a professional, but doesn't need to be, right? And people are doing some version of bidding by paddle, right? They're raising their hand, they're raising their paddle, they have a number on their paddle. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about a live auction. A silent auction, right, is where there are tables set up and there are items, and they might be jewelry, and they might be scarves, and they might be sculptures, and they might be art, or they might be gift certificates, or they might be descriptions of, um, an experience that somebody has donated and is offering. Um, but what makes them silent, is that there's no live bidding, right? And you can choose to do a silent auction either the 20th or the 21st century way. There's nothing wrong with the 20th century way. If you're a smaller congregation, there's nothing wrong with having clipboards with, paper and an attached pen, and having the rules spelled out. By the way, in the center column, in the middle square, if you will, you can see that setting your bidding rules and making them really clear and having them posted wherever you have your silent auction happening, having those written and visible, good idea. Everybody likes to know what the rules are and how to do this, right? So if you need to up your bid in increments of $10, then it should say it, right? Or if your bid, if you've indicated what your starting bid is and that everybody needs to go with this starting bid or higher, then you can say it. But you don't need to do the clipboard and pen thing for the silent auction. You can go back to these guys and you can let them set you up with a situation where people are able to make silent auction bids on their smartphone. And no, they do not need to download an app. All they need to do is receive an email or a text message with their personalized link that these platforms I showed you provide, and they set it all up so that the person is basically able to keep bidding on silent auction items using their phone. And this is a great way to do this. Let's talk about a few of these other items here. How do you procure appealing items? Well, for a synagogue auction, your best items probably aren't items, right? In a lot of cases, they are a chance to go spend 3 days at somebody's, home in the mountains, or a chance to spend time in this particular amazing downtown Airbnb that somebody else loves, and they have decided to gift, something like that sort of thing. Um, you want to pick items that through kind of test conversations with various folks in the community, you find out have a lot of appeal. Um, it's not great to have more than like 8 live items, and you could have like 10, especially if some of them are like, I don't know, if you decide it would be fun for your community for some reason to have some actual solid object type items that maybe are not bigger dollar auction items, but you want to just have that in the mix. Perhaps because you want to give some attention to artists in your community who created the items. Um, you know, just remember, you're probably better off taking works that people in the community created and having them be on the silent auction table, because you don't want to have somebody have their auction up on a screen, their item up on a screen, and nobody bid on it. That would not be good. Um, so, um, but do think about a general strategy of having experiences that are very appealing, dominate your live auction items, and having the silent auction that's happening concurrently um, for physical goods. I probably don't even need to say why it's important to keep the energy up, but it's a great idea to have an enthusiastic MC, right? If you are hiring an auctioneer, often they are very good at doing that throughout the whole evening. Um, it's good to have like a fundraising thermometer or other visual. I actually am sick of thermometers, and there's a worksheet in the guide that gives you like 100 alternatives to a thermometer, but that is something that still fills up visually, um, and that maybe has more fun expressing something about your congregation. Um, I want to talk of these other things that are here. You want to create opportunities for people to just donate. Okay. And so like I said, those software platforms will give you some of those opportunities, and they'll walk you through how to do it. But you can also have like a text to give option that is set up so that people know that throughout the evening, if they text, this particular 5-digit number, they can then key in an amount that they want to donate. Um, or you can have, during a live auction, you can have, and you should have, like one or more straight up donations. Those tend to be the most successful if they are attached to a specific purpose. Religious school, B'nai Mitzvah tutoring, adult ed, something even more specific than that. Especially if somebody spends 60 seconds saying why this is so important to them and why they devote their time and energy to make it happen in the synagogue. And then, boom, you're asking people. We talked about making backup plans, remembering that rabbis have emergencies that will take precedence over any event of this nature. And then the last thing I want to talk about is streamlining checkout. So streamlining checkout is possibly the most important factor in whether or not your guests at an auction event leave feeling inspired or frustrated. Um, you really want to make this as frictionless an exit as possible. So again, this is one of the reasons why I really like these platforms like Give Butter and Better World and Network for Good, because they will walk you through a setup that does things like collect people's debit or credit card number through their signing up for the auction itself, and so that you can not have to worry about people waiting in a line to actually pay for the items that they bid on. You can also, if somebody has, several physical object items, having people whose job during the event is to package those items together into a single, wrapped up package that's nice, is a really great way to sort of be ready for them in a checkout line. You can also have volunteers, and if you have teens, this can be a pretty good job for teens, to sort of be mobile concierges, which is like after somebody wins a bid on something in a live auction, they basically head out to them and, bring a tablet and kind of just help process their payment through and, verify whatever information it is. They're going to be happy about that because they want to leave when it's time to leave. Okay. As you can imagine, a piece of what you have figured out on this timeline is how you're going to market this thing. As I said, the guide itself provides um, some pretty rich, detailed support around what your options are. And there's just plenty of resources available in the guide on this. So I'm not going to spend any more time on this slide. I do want to spend some time on this slide. You do want to have some careful thought put into the materials for your event. So you've got a committee together that's organizing an event like this. Somebody should be responsible for the materials for the event itself, right? And this is where you also have the opportunity to create chances for people to get to know each other in very informal ways. Okay, so yes, you will have like a program booklet, which may be where you have, sponsorships or where people have taken out ads. But hopefully, you've also done something inspiring or interesting where people are asked to not just, buy a quarter of a page, but actually offer a personal word of support or appreciation for the community. You're going to want to think about all these other items that are in this list. The one I want to spend a moment on is forms or worksheets for other activities. So you have the opportunity to have things like, a fancy pad of paper and several pens with like an instruction card. And it can be a group activity that you're asking everyone at the table to do. Um, there are a lot of different sort of icebreaker type or somewhat more synagogue specific, light but enjoyable activities that people can do with material items that are there during this event. Okay, I really wanted to get to this slide while we still have some time remaining, and we do. So at a certain point, as you're moving through this timeline, you are going to be planning your run of show, right? And that is basically your like granular schedule of this whole event. So I want to now I want to now present for you in the middle column some very general, like take these as rough guidelines options, right? So so far in this presentation, I've kind of talked about events with an auction and events that don't have an auction. Now I'm going to put aside the whole auction thing for a second. I'm going to talk about events that have dinner and events that don't. So I want to present as an option, not the only option, but and I'm just going to talk about evening options in this presentation, though that's not the only option either. But you can do a model where there are heavy hors d'oeuvres rather than dinner that costs less and can still be really quite wonderful and kind of a memorable food experience for a lot of people. Also creates a lot of opportunities to feature, um, uh, munchies that fit different people's dietary needs, because you can maybe have a wider range of offerings than with dinner. So imagine that you're doing that kind of an event. If you're going to do it on a Sunday evening and there is not a seated dinner, then the target you're aiming for is an event that is 2.5 hours to 3.5 hours max, starting at 6. The event, by the time you get to 9 o'clock, a lot of people are not going to have any like internal urge to like bid on something else or make another donation. They're going to be ready to go. So you want to have the things that are the most important things in your evening happen before 9 o'clock. Okay. If you do this on a weeknight and for some reason the interwebs thinks that congregations in general are going to want to do this on a Thursday evening, more likely so than just about any other evening, you're going to want it to be like a half an hour shorter, right? 2 to 2.5 hours. If you are doing this with dinner, you can see down below, you've got more time to work with. And the way that you would structure an evening like that is somewhat different. It means that the first hour of the evening, like on a Sunday at 5, is like there's like some light hors d'oeuvres, not heavy hors d'oeuvres, and maybe beverages, and there's some other kinds of icebreakers that are happening, etc. If you are having dinner, the guides worksheet, there are guide worksheets that talk about some really good ways to integrate um, your live auction and your silent auction so that so that your live auction is actually happening during part of while food is being served. Um, if you're not having dinner, similarly, you'll see, like a boilerplate um, good practices version that you can modify as needed, but you don't have to like invent this from like out of nowhere. There are some well-road tested models here. Um, Two things that I hope any run of show would include are featured in the right-hand column. It's important that there be different kinds of events that are built into the run of the evening that facilitate connections between and amongst people in clever or humorous ways. And you want to use this as an opportunity to potentially have some friendships begin. It's a real special opportunity for your congregation to become a place where the bonds of friendship and connection grow stronger and crisscross each other even more. And you want to have somebody on your planning committee who is responsible for making sure that your plan for capturing stories and a lot of photos and also trying to get like consent from people to use photos and stories is happening because you want to collect a bunch of those during this event. There are some really crucial day of preparations. I don't think I've covered all of them, but I've covered some big ones, right? If you have any kind of visual stuff that's happening with screens, right? That's got to be day of checked. Audio and sound, Wi-Fi, whatever your system is for collecting money and letting people exit the event. The streamlining checkout, as they say. You want to be triple checking that. You want to be triple checking whatever your system is going to be for collecting the information you'll need to collect during the evening, whether it's auction bids or winning bids, or whether it is other kinds of information, including the results of some kind of participatory activity where people maybe are writing down things that they would be interested in giving some volunteer energy to in the future. And of course, you're going to want to be triple checking that your food prep stuff is happening, that the people have showed up, that everything is as it should be. I'm going to just move on from that. There are two types of activities that happen after a big event like this. One is acknowledging people, and one is accounting for mainly finances, but also accounting to the community about the event. So, so thanking people and steps that involve capturing and properly preserving information and reporting back to the community. The thanking people well, I always talk about how important this is, and I can't say it enough. The thing you want to avoid, the mistake that can be easy to make with a big event like this, is just missing some people who should have been thanked. And you have, there are some there's specific advice points in the guide about options that you would have for when you need to do most of these thank yous. Who should be getting something that's a little more than an email, that maybe that's a handwritten acknowledgement or a call. And that is going to depend a lot on the specifics of your event and how much effort it took to put on, and so forth. But just know that the work is not done until everyone's been thanked really well. And this is a list of some of the sort of follow-through events that involve accounting. There's some kind of financial reconciliation that you'll end up having to do, or some kind of follow-on action that someone will have to do if you worked with one of those fundraising platform softwares. You're going to want to be doing some communication about the event within the first 48 hours after it's over. And that's going to include some kind of celebratory email that, among other things, says, thanks to you, thanks to all of us, we were able to raise blah, 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 which is going to help us do blah, 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 blah. It's important that it include those specifics. And you're going to want to be bringing data over from whatever place it is to whatever place it is that you want it to land. You're going to want to follow those initial bursts of communication with something like newsletter stories, some follow-on stories that are more interesting than just a bunch of people standing around posing for photos. I wouldn't do that. I would do photos that are candid and show action, and I would be looking for stories that were interesting about, like, two people who met each other who didn't know that they grew up in a different city. That's what you're kind of looking for, is stuff that's just sort of fun and that happened, and that led to something lovely occurring. And if you don't have any stories like that, like, have some people ask around and try to find them. And then these last things are kind of about making sure that the people who did all the work are treated right, and debrief is stuck in there as well. You're going to want to debrief before more than a few days pass. Like, you don't want to let more than a week go by before you are able to pull together the people on that committee, and perhaps some other key staff, clergy, maybe a few board members, and just order some food and do a thorough debrief and try to identify what went well, what didn't go so well, what you could learn for the next time. So I'm going to close us out of this. This was a big information dump of a presentation, and that's one of the reasons why I've repeated that this presentation in particular is really meant to be kind of a companion to the chapter in the guide. And I know we only have 3 minutes. If we take 5 whole minutes, I'll try to respond to a couple questions. I see Chaim has his hand up.
So we did a 20th anniversary of our rabbi being with us, and our silent auction items that really got us all the money were 2 weekend stays at second homes, and the big one was we have a carpenter who's really handy, and his 3 hours of service doing handyman service went for a huge price. So if there are people in your community who do something, sell their services. But you know, 3 hours of handyman services went over, I think it was like $800 for 3 hours worth of time.
Did someone have a crush on the handyman? I mean, that's
No, that we had there were several people competing for 3 hours of handyman
did
services.
several people have a crush on?
We
I'm
will
kidding.
talk
I'm
about
kidding.
that.
I'm so kidding.
Yeah.
But no, thank you. And I appreciate that you shared that those were really
Maurice,
positive
part of the
results.
message there, thank you, Chaim, is something that people know they can use and that doesn't require scheduling. So the weekend at some beautiful place on the lake looks very attractive, but people think, when can I do it? Will I be able to do it? Will it be free? But a handyman, 3 hours of somebody helping you, that's my guess, Chaim, as to why that was very successful. You think that way too, because sometimes the kind of snazzy offerings turn out to be less attractive than you think because for the reasons I suggested.
I think that's a really good point. And I will say, like, I have seen the kind of items that you're describing, where somebody who's got a professional level of skill is offering their service, a couple hours or whatever it is that they're offering. Those things are, I think, always going to attract bids, and it's also an opportunity for you to be able to build relationships, either with strengthen relationships with members who offer these services or with people in the local community. And it's a win-win. And I think that you can do really well if you have too many of these items that you can do in a live auction. It's okay to have them happen as part of a silent auction, and you can get creative. Like you could potentially have each person who's submitting a thing, if they're willing, submit a selfie and a couple of paragraphs kind of saying something about who they are and why they love doing this kind of work, right? So that you're making it a little bit more personal as well, um, even if it is an item that's on a table that people are kind of walking around and browsing to do silent auction. Anyone else? I'm curious if there's anybody who is anybody part of a congregation that does something like this annually?
Like a
Uh,
gala
I
annually, or
Yeah, a big gala or auction that's a fundraiser.
and we do annual fundraisers. It's just we vary them every year.
Okay.
My
Do
day
as
job is with another congregation, and we do something like this every single year.
Uh-huh.
Um, I think most of what you put in here is very similar to what we do,
Hmm.
with like picking theme and making sure that bookings are done well enough in advance that we don't necessarily have to worry about cancellations, but we can also line up backups. We do a silent auction every year, and we just have one point of contact at the end of the evening for checkout, and we do it all through ShulCloud.
Okay.
And so, like, all of the items are held back until paid for.
Right.
So it's very transactional exchange there. Uh, and then the nice thing about doing it through ShulCloud is that because that's also our CRM, all of the accounting reconciliation is right there in one place. So we don't have to do the importing from a different app kind of thing, but we've also never done a live auction, so we haven't needed that additional technology.
And if you're making it work with Show Cloud, that's great. Let me call on Robin real quick. Thank you, Brandon. I appreciate that.
we do some sort of fundraiser every year, whether it's a concert or a dinner honoring someone. Usually, lately, it's been clergy retiring or clergy hiring, like their installations. And yeah, we used to do auctions, both live and silent. And for all of the work that goes into it, our congregation just didn't support it. They were excited about it, and we had a lot of people come. And we had a couple that had a beach property um, in um, in Bethany, and they were giving a 3-day weekend in there. It went for $200. Nobody bid over $200.
Ouch. Okay.
It was really crazy. Even, tickets, football tickets, barely made the cost of the ticket. It was crazy. So we did stop doing the auctions because the amount of work that goes into everything did not um, did not transpire. But usually our events do. We raise about $10,000 to $12,000 for the dinners and things like that. This past spring, they um, honored me and kept me completely secret because I just
Wow.
celebrated my 13th year with the congregation. And they they wouldn't ask me any questions. And I'm really the only person that goes into Shul Cloud, but I did not know who was coming to the event. I did not know anything about what was happening. It was really a secret. And I was worried, like, financially. I kept saying, "Can I help you with the budget?" No, 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 this, that, and the other. Um, it was not a fundraiser. They did it as a break even, because they're like, "You're the only one that knows how to do this." But it is. I mean, everything that you have in here is great. There's some new things that I picked up, but it was very nice. So thank
I
you.
think that's a great memory, or sorry, a great story for us to end on. And I think it's hilarious to hear you say, thanks guys, but don't screw this up. Um, but no, that's beautiful. It's lovely that they honored you that way. And all right, let us disperse. We're back in 2 weeks. Email me if you have other questions or there's stuff you really, really, really want to touch on during our last meeting in 2 weeks. And take good care, everyone. Take care of each other.
Thank you.